Hello, it's October 2024, and this video is going to be different to how I normally do videos, because I'm going to be telling a story. Perhaps we'll call it a fictitious story. And the story goes like this. You have an individual, super intelligent on all disciplines, and this person can make things and come up with new ideas and all sorts of stuff. And this individual has, say, a dozen associates, and they're all sitting around wondering, okay, well, what do we do? So the top person, the one who has all this great intelligence, call that the main character, decides to make a game. Perhaps we'll call it a game board. But it's not going to be a game board with little plastic pieces or a virtual game board on a video game. This is going to be a real tangible game board with real tangible characters and everything. And that's the plan. So the main character sets out to put this all together. So he and the associates go out and scout, figuring out, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, they come across, we'll say, this big, massive island, we'll call it, and it's all covered with ice. So what next? Well, the main character decides to carve out in the center of this dry piece of land, we'll say, and this is going to be the game board. And through this process, puts up everything that will be needed to play this game, and also give them the opportunity to make things, see how they work, etc. So now the game board is established, and they realize that the ice that surrounds them, this game board, is perfect because it's going to contain the game within the game board. Perfect setup. So the main character decides to start making all the pieces. Now, as they're sitting there, it's like, well, what should these pieces look like? You have endless, infinity of possibilities, but they decide to make the game pieces look like them. Why not? So that's going to be, for example, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, torso, the whole 9 yards. And they say, well, these game pieces are going to resemble us. So they're making, as a descriptive, synthetics. They have the general appearance, but they look different. Perfect. And with some tweaking and everything else, the game pieces are in play. The game pieces are the synthetics, are programmed, just like we would see in today's world, a video game where the non-player control characters just are automated somewhat. That's excellent. And then these synthetics can be manipulated through reprogramming, whether it be through some sort of internal programming or external programming, just like we see today, for example, with social engineering and everything else. Perfect. This is almost like a reality game from their perspective. And everything that the synthetics need to survive and play the game is given. So the main character says, well, hey, I'm going to break this up among you dozen associates, and you guys take care of your part of the game and let the game begin. Now there's rules, for example, with this game, things that cannot be done, things that can be done. Now, aside from the associates, there's others around, different backgrounds, we'll say, watching and, maybe even partaking to some degree. And then you have a group which are dedicated to make sure that there's no cheating in this game. Now, all the game pieces are stuck in the center of the game because surrounding them are obstacles. We'll say water, because the ice had to melt, and then you have this great vastness of ice. And the game plays. Now we have a time where, for example, some of the ones that were to be observing to make sure there's no cheating and everything else, they're looking at these game pieces and they're attracted to them. So they break the rules that they're supposed to be enforcing and taking information back to the main character. So they enter the game and do unthinkable things, we'll say. Now, the game was not meant for destruction, basically like a creative game. And the dozen associates were to perhaps expand on it, try things out, whatever they want to do. So now they're not just sitting around wondering what to do next. They have something to do. But things have happened. Some of the dozen are not very nice. They're opportunists. They're taking advantage. Some cheat. And some are good. They're trying to advance their portion of the game. The end game, well, the one who masterminded the whole thing knows the end game. And so do, for example, the dozen associates. Just imagine a game like that on that scale. Huge. So they proceed to play, and over time, things from the game board perspective becomes worse and worse, because the ones that are not too kind to the game pieces, they're just taking the opportunity to explore the not so nice side of life. Now, the game pieces, they're unaware, for the most part, what's really going on. And from their perspective, the game board that they're on, their world, is made for them, and it is. And from their perspective, they're seeing themselves as special. And they're continuing on, programmed, again, through some internal means or external means, just going on. And you have the players of the game even jumping in to, for example, just as a descriptive, project into them so they can actually physically manipulate them. So the game is physical, tangible, real. The game pieces are trying to now figure out what's going on. Things are not making sense. And why are things the way they are? That's a huge game being played on a very, very big game board. And some of the pieces figured it out. Some of the game pieces, the synthetics, were told, which they weren't supposed to be, what's really going on. And agreements have been made and everything else because the game has to go to completion. Now, the main character who put this game together and everything else took a section of the game board for themselves, and that's a whole different tangent of the story. But when the game is over, the main character will say, okay, you guys didn't do a good job, or very mean, for example, to your game pieces and infected the rest of the game. These other ones were cheating, lying, stealing. These other ones were breaking their own rules that they were supposed to be enforcing and reporting back. So when the game is over, the main character is going to say, okay, well, you guys who were doing bad things, generally speaking, are going to be punished for it. Whatever that punishment is, it's going to be. So where does that leave all the game pieces when the game's over? Well, the game pieces that weren't infected by, say, badness and everything else, perhaps they go on to play another game, be game pieces for another game. For the main character, the, say, dozen associates, and whoever else is around wanting to participate in the game. And that's basically the story. There's a lot of details that could be added in and everything else. You can use your own imagination and make your own conclusions, for example, how the game was being played and how the game will end. But the game pieces themselves, overall, are what we would call, in our world, with video games and PCs, they see what they want to see. They do whatever it is that they do, thinking that they have free will, which they do to some degree. But remember, they're game pieces. Anyway, that's really the story, and that's all I really want to share. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say, when is it going to get easier? When you die.